Well, hello, welcome to this week's episode of How to HR. How are you? This is episode number 7 of our How to HR series, and today we've got an extra special episode for you looking at how to know if your employee has checked out. For those of you who I don't know, hi, I'm Kristy-Lee. I host this How to HR series each and every week on a Thursday here on Facebook and over on YouTube as well. And who don't know my background, I own and run a consultancy business known as the Footprint Group, and I'm the founder of the Your People Powered Business membership, as well as the host of the People Powered Business podcast. So if this is your first time watching in here onto the How to HR series, welcome. It's great to have you here, and for our returning viewers, welcome back. So great to see you here again. Now, if you are joining us live and not catching the replay, then feel free to ask questions or pop a note in comments. Let me know that you're here. And if you do have any suggestions for upcoming episodes of How to HR, please let me know in the comments thread so that I know which topics might be of most value to you and what you'd love to hear more about. How to HR is all about giving you quick snippets of information, strategies, advice that you can take away and implement straight into your business. So they're meant to be really digestible pieces of information that I bring to you each and every week on this series. So as I said, this is episode number 7. If you haven't checked out the previous episodes, please head back and do that. You can watch them here on Facebook, or you can watch them on our YouTube channel, which is simply Kristy-Lee Billet. But today's episode is, as I said, all about how to know, how to tell if you have an employee who has checked out. What do I mean by checked out? Well, you might have heard the word employee engagement before, and as you would sort of guess, the opposite of engagement is disengagement. An employee who has checked out is an employee who has become disengaged, perhaps no longer interested, perhaps actively looking for other work, or perhaps just not really committed to or interested in their role any longer. Now, some of the signs that we see when an employee has checked out are really obvious, but not always. Sometimes they're quite subtle. And sometimes they're things that you wouldn't necessarily associate with a disengaged employee or someone who is checked out. And so they're subtle and you need to watch out for them. And here's why it's important. Once an employee has checked out mentally from their work, they, as I said, become disengaged, but even worse than that, they can very easily become toxic to those who are around them. So they can start to have a real influence and impact on the rest of the team that work with them and even other departments that they associate with. And of course, that might also mean that they're going to start to have a negative impact on your customers or your suppliers, the people that they're talking to. So it's not just a matter of having an issue with an employee who has checked out in terms of that individual employee. It's about the wider reach, the impact that their behaviour, their attitude, their approach to work has on those around them. It can actually become a real cultural issue if left unnoticed or if left unmanaged for any period of time when you've got an employee who has checked out, because it can start to become the norm that, well, if they're getting away with this behaviour, if they're able to approach work this way and there's no negative consequences for them, why don't I just do the same thing? So you start to create a culture of checked out employees, and that is not what any business wants. The research and the statistics tell us very clearly that employee engagement drives productivity, drives profitability, and drives business performance. And I'm talking to the tune of increasing productivity by around 16-17% and increasing profitability by upwards of 20% when you've got a highly engaged team in your workplace. Now, what happens, the other thing we know in these stats is that it takes at least 4 highly engaged team members to counteract the negative impact that one single disengaged, checked out employee has on our business. So it's at least a 4-to-1 ratio. If you've got a small team, the numbers can very easily stack against you when you have one person that's checked out mentally from their work. So how do we know that we've got an employee that's checked out? What are some of the subtle signs that we can be looking for? I'm going to share with you 5 surefire ways that you're going to know if you've got a checked out employee on your hands, and then what pathways you've got to deal with them. The first one is this, and some businesses are shocked when they hear this. It's absenteeism. If you've got an employee who is taking all of their leave, almost to the point where you can predict when they're going to take their next sick day because it's got nothing to do with their sick leave, the second they've got that day accrued, they're taking it, they They might not take all their annual leave because they'll be storing that up for when they're eventually going to leave. They want to get that payout. But certainly with their sick leave, if they are taking all of their sick leave or almost all of their sick leave all of the time, almost certainly they've checked out. High absenteeism rates are one of the key correlations we see with disengagement and people that have checked out of work. So whilst you might think that they're just lazy or sickly or have bad luck with accidents, the chances are 99% certainty they've checked out. They're not engaged in their work anymore. They're looking for opportunities to not be at work and to be paid to not be at work, which is exactly what sick leave gives them. So absenteeism is the number one sign. Some more subtle signs you might start to see. You might see a change in their routine. So let's say you've got an employee who would regularly turn up to work, about 15 minutes before their required start time, get themselves a cup of coffee, get settled in, say hi to everyone, and, then they're working away at their normal start time. Over time, and this can be really subtle, they'll start to come in later and later and later. They won't be coming in at 1:45 anymore. They'll start to turn up at maybe 10:50. And then gradually it becomes closer and closer to their actual start time, to the point where they're often walking in the door right on time, and then they're having a chat, then they're getting a coffee, and then they're finally starting work, 15 minutes after they should be. Now that can be really subtle, so you've got to watch for that because it won't be overnight. It won't go from turning up at 1:45 to turning up right at 9 a.m. overnight. It will be a subtle change. And it's that what you're seeing there is that change in motivation. They're no longer motivated to jump out of bed and get to work. They're no longer motivated to turn up on time because they want to do the right thing. They're no longer motivated to get there early and have a chat to everyone so they're still working from their normal start time. They're no longer motivated to do their job with the same level of commitment and enthusiasm that they once were. So watch for that change. One of the other subtle signs you'll see is they may start to withdraw from the social connections at work. So if they used to quite often have lunch with some of their teammates, they'll start to withdraw from that. They might find excuses like they don't have time, they've got to do an appointment at lunch, they need to make a phone call. They'll start to make excuses to withdraw from that social network, particularly if they were quite tight-knit with that social network, because if they've got an exit strategy in mind, if they're actively looking for other work or they're just no longer interested in being in the workplace, they may no longer be interested in those social connections. Now, when I'm talking about social connections here, I'm not talking about just general office chat. I'm talking about people that actually really wanted to spend time with, they enjoyed having lunch with. Perhaps they often talked about work at lunch. And so they don't want to do that anymore. They're no longer that interested to talk about work at lunch. They might stop going out for Friday drinks or decline invitations to attend social activities after work. So they'll start to withdraw from the social connections that work once brought them. Another sign you might see is they may become distracted. They'll become less focused on their work. So things that they don't really need to get involved in, they'll suddenly want to become involved in. The quality of their work in terms of accuracy and attention to detail and meeting deadlines will quite often start to slip. And they'll start to just get distracted, like shiny object syndrome. They'll get distracted by anything. Now, sometimes that can be work distractions, but things that they really shouldn't be doing and things that aren't going to help them in their role or help you in the delivery of their role. But often it can be things that are not work related. This is where general office chatter that is totally, out of control and unnecessary starts. So this is very different from social withdrawal. This is chatter for chatter's sake. This is chatter in order to avoid doing work. So, they're not particularly interested in the story the other employee is telling them. They're just looking for a way to avoid doing any work. They might also be distracted more by their mobile phone or social media. So you might want to check their web browsers and see what they're up to there. They could be very well searching for other work online if they're able to do that from work. So they'll become distracted very easily. So if someone who doesn't usually use their mobile phone a whole lot at work except when necessary suddenly seems to have it attached to their hand constantly, likelihood is they have checked out mentally from the workplace. And the fifth surefire way to know if you've got someone that has checked out is you'll start to see a change in their demeanor. So their behavior and their attitudes. They're not going to be asking as many questions as they once did. They're no longer curious about how things work or how they can help do things better or why we're doing things that way. They're no longer putting their hand up with suggestions in team meetings. They're no longer enthusiastically supporting someone else's suggestions or input in a meeting. Perhaps they get a bit snappy when someone says something to them when they've never been a snappy kind of person before. So you'll notice changes in their behaviour and demeanour. And this is again comes back to that motivation. They're no longer that interested in work. They've checked out mentally. These people effectively are physically turning up at work, but not mentally turning up at work at all. These people are walking, doing, sitting at their desk, sitting at their workstation, in the factory doing their production, but mentally their head's not in the game. And that's the piece that makes all the difference between a good employee and a bad employee. We don't want robots. We want people that are genuinely interested in being at work. So these 5 signs that I've just shared with you are indicators that you've got someone turning up physically, but not mentally, not emotionally, and not with any motivation. So to recap what they are: absenteeism, particularly with sick leave, changes in routine in terms of when and how they're doing things, withdrawal from their true social connections at work, being less focused and more distracted, and their changes in their behaviour and attitude and demeanour at work. Now, if you identify that you've got someone that has probably checked out based on these criteria, what to do next is probably the question you're asking. You really only have 3 choices. One is you just ignore it and wait for the course to play out, whatever that is. If they're planning to get another job or they're just going to hang out like that for a while longer, you can leave it go. I highly recommend you don't do that. That is how you're going to end up with a toxic employee. It's also how you're going to end up with cultural issues with the rest of the team thinking that their behaviour is acceptable. So my advice is don't take option number 1. Option number 2 is you bring it to a head yourself and you confront them, have a conversation with them in an appropriate way and have a chat to them. Let them know you've noticed these changes and you're wondering whether there's something going on that you can assist with. Now, option number 2 in bringing it to a head is a good option if you want to fast track the process. If you don't want this person in your business, bringing it to a head will fast track their exit one way or another. So be careful here, because don't do this approach unless you aren't convinced you want this person in your business, and tread carefully from a legal perspective if you're going to go down that path number 2. Path number 3 is this: if you want this person in your business, if you want them to return to the once fabulous employee that you had, then you need to put in place some engagement strategies. Now, there's a whole range of different engagement strategies out there, but you need to very quickly try and turn this situation around. The longer they sit in checked out mode, the harder it's going to be to bring them back around. So if this is a valuable employee to you and you've noticed they've checked out, then I encourage you to very quickly start looking at ways you can re-engage them in the workplace, re-engage them in their role, in the team, and in the business. There's a myriad of ways you can do that. And if you want a free resource on that, let me know, pop a comment below and I'll get you a link for a free resource that has a list of engagement strategies you can trial. There's lots of different options. No, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it is probably going to be a multitude of different things you're going to want to put in place. But I highly encourage you that if this employee is valuable and you notice these behaviours, put in place some work to improve their engagement in the business and hopefully turn them around and turn them back into that fabulous employee that you once had. That's it for me from How to HR today. So today's episode, how to know if you've got an employee who has checked out and what to do about it, was our topic. Thanks for joining me. If you're catching the replay, let me know that you've caught the replay. Just put #replay in the comments. And if you do want that free resource, pop it in a comment below and I'll make sure to get you the link for that. That's it for me today. Have a fabulous week and I'll see you back here next Thursday on How to HR. Take care.